Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about the storage on the brand new PS5 and Xbox Series X and S. Today's video I want to talk about three things: the internal storage they arrive with, I want to talk about upgradability, and I want to talk about that backwards compatibility storage. Now, a lot of the things in today's video you may already know. A lot of the specs have been published online, but there is still going to be gaps that people that work in storage are going to be able to fill in for you. So even if you think you know everything to know right now at the time of publishing about these two consoles coming in November of this year, 2020, do stay tuned for the end, because there's lots of stuff specific to the SSD industry that you may find helpful, and it may help you decide whether you should buy a drive today or if you should wait another 6 months or so. So, Xbox and PlayStation, right now both of them arrive with a 1TB internal storage drive, but it is worth highlighting that the PlayStation, although it arrives with 1TB, will actually only have 825 gigabytes readily available for storage, with the Xbox arriving with 1 terabyte of storage. Now, there are reasons for that haven't still fully been fleshed out by the brands, but it is a very well-known and established fact, both on tech demos and just by the sheer specifications leaked, that the PlayStation 5 is the faster of the two, arriving at 5 gigabytes per second speed with uncompressed raw data and compressed data, where data is packaged together and unpackaged at the other end, at 8 to 9 gigabytes, which is a tremendous improvement in speed, with the Xbox arriving at 2.4 gigabytes per second uncompressed raw and 4.8 gigabytes compressed, passing it through there. Now, a lot of that is to do with the SSD media inside, but also I think a little bit of that compressed data, the different size available there, 825 out of 1 terabyte on the PlayStation, is because of things like over provisioning, where you utilize areas of SSD to assist in buffering and hand holding the storage inside the device. Now, the new generation of consoles, much like their predecessors, they're going to be around for 5 to 10 years. They may get upgrades throughout their lifetime, but the core model and the core base of the system is going to remain largely the same. And this has been an issue for a lot of manufacturers over the years in the console world, where they have to create a system that has to be even more future-proof than the last. So in this generation, storage is key. In the previous generations, it's been about moving to Blu-rays, or it was about moving to network and internet connectivity. In other ones, it was about improving the memory or the graphical capabilities. In this generation, although there have been enormous moves forward in terms of internal CPU architecture, the memory utilization, the graphics, ray tracing and stuff like that, as well as network improvements, Wi-Fi 6 being rolled inside, despite all of that, the biggest innovations for my money are about the storage media. Now, for the PS4 and the Xbox One, you may already be aware, arrived with hard drives like this one, which gave you at top around about 100 or so megabytes per second. Then the Pro series came out and stuff like that arrived with SSDs inside. These gave around about 550, 600 at the very top megabytes per second performance. This next generation utilizes NVMe SSDs. Now, NVMe SSDs do vary in their speed, and I will go into a little bit more detail about the generations in a bit, but the SSDs inside these systems have the potential to reach 5 to 7, 8, 9,000 gigabytes per second transmission. Now, that is phenomenal. That means, again, as the adverts state, near zero loading times, super fast, blah, 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 etc. And having that amount of raw data speed is what allows all those other components we just talked about to do their thing. They've always been held back by the storage, aka not the amount of storage, the speed at which larger data can be retrieved. Now, there's still no confirmation yet on what storage media will work with the PlayStation 5. And by the storage media, I mean the ones to run the PS5 games. We'll touch on PS4 later on, but focusing for a moment on the PS5 here, you are looking at needing SSDs that are going to be at the very least PCIe Gen 4 times 4, maybe even times 8, if that's even a thing at this point, which I don't believe it is in 2020 in a commercial sense, maybe next year. But the PCIe architecture of SSDs, you may notice if you do look online, whenever you see an NVMe or a PCIe based SSD that promotes speeds in excess of 8,000, right now they are PCIe card based SSDs. They will never fit inside a PlayStation 5. They're big old cards which utilize the huge bandwidth available to traditional PCIe or PCI Express lanes. These aren't like that. You need to use PCIe NVMe, currently 1.3. And at the moment, the current contender for SSD that can be utilized in the PS5 system is the Samsung 980 Pro. However, even that one doesn't seem, with its controller, I think it utilizes the, not the FISM, the LPIS controller. That still isn't giving that bandwidth that Sony are saying that the PlayStation 5 can do. Now, those speeds that the PS5 is promoting there may be top end when everything's running beautifully as good as it can be. When manufacturers of software are able to eke the most out of that system, but it may not be there on day one as far as the software is concerned, because the software just hasn't had the hands-on to make the most of it, and the developers really get that performance. So maybe that 980 will work on day one, but there's still no avoiding the fact that that Samsung 980 Pro has still not been PS5 certified. It's still not had Sony say, these are the recommended minimums for an SSD in our system. Does that drive meet them? It doesn't. So at this stage, I don't think it is sensible at all to buy one of those drives until we know the certified recommended minimums of that drive. The PS5 has that internal 1TB SSD, but it also has a second bay. Sorry, there's lots of drilling work going on outside. It also has a second NVMe bay where you're going to install your upgrade. So even if you're looking at 1TB drive saying, well, that's not much, I've already got 1TB inside, it's okay because it's a parallel port there running side by side with it, which is in itself that super fast NVMe PCIe upgrade slot. Now, in the case of the Xbox, slightly different story. It's got that NVMe SSD inside that's given between 2.4 and 4.8 gigabytes per second throughput, compressed and uncompressed, but their upgrades arrive via a CFX slot. I believe it's CF Express, and it is an M2 NVMe inside, and again, that is PCIe Gen 4 times 2, I understand, that's being delivered via that little container, like a memory card slot, but don't think in those terms of blocks and stuff like that, being introduced into that slot to let you have another terabyte. Now, that 1TB drive is knocking around for about $220, $230, shopping around right now for pre-order, which, if we move over to that Samsung 980, which once again I do not recommend you buy unless it gets certified and supported, that arrives at £125 for 250 gig, £200 for a 500 gig, and reading off my notes, a 300 just over pounds for a 1 terabyte. So between them, even then, those NVMe's from the Samsung ones are going to be more expensive than that Seagate introduction drive. I know a lot of people don't like utilizing proprietary hard drives when it's the manufacturer buddies up with a certain brand, so the peripherals all come out of that. But I think in the case of the 1TB for the Xbox, I think it's okay, because you're going to need to know the drive that you are including that's going to be working in unison with the internal drive. You need to know those speeds are going to be just as good, otherwise that could present a bottleneck and ultimately lower performance overall. So why all this furore? What is the problem with NVMe's in SSD? Why is this such a pain in the arse? Well, nice and simple, it comes down to two factors: the interface and the storage itself. Because right now, a number of you are looking at big drives and thinking, Christ, that cost almost as much as the console. And you're right to say that. The reason is that to get these high speeds, these are SSDs that have either been released just this year or aren't even released yet. So these are ones that are utilizing superfast PCIe, which opens up the bandwidth, the channel of communication between the storage on the SSD and the main controller board. You need more you'll need a wider PCIe lane to get that through. PCIe goes up, PCIe 1 at 250 megabytes, PCIe 2, Gen 2, that's 500, PCIe 3, which is 1000 megabytes, and then PCIe 4, which allows 2000 megabytes, so effectively 2 gigabytes through. And then the times at the end, the times 1, times 2, times 4, etc., is just that first number times whatever. Go a PCIe Gen 4 at 2000 times 4 is 8000, and that's it. That's by how you understand the PCIe. But because these drives are so modern and the R&D on them is so fresh, the paint is still wet, they are gonna be expensive, and that's where half of that money really goes. The second part is the storage. The storage on those NVMe's inside, unlike those mechanical hard drives where it was on platters, the result is that they need to squeeze a lot of storage in there. Now, the NAND is what the cells on the SSD are. That's where the storage lives. There's another area where there's the main controller, which is another whole area in itself that we need to cover. But the NAND on these drives isn't just a block equals X amount of storage. It's so much more detailed than that. And most of that goes down to the layers. Most SSDs on, whether it's those 2.5-inch drives or on those NVMe's, all come down to the number of layers inside. The more layers there are, the more storage there can be. However, SSDs can wear down, and the performance you get from them decreases with the more layers that are on that, because there's more searching. So what you find is generally SSDs these days will predominantly be found in MLC multi-layer cells, TLC triple layer cells, and more recently QLC quad layer cells. So 4, 3 and 2 moving backwards. You don't want to go for the QLC. So although you'll get more storage and effectively get more terabytes for your money, you won't get the performance. You need to aim at the TLC. MLC obviously gives a better performance, but you're just not going to get those storage values you want. So you're generally going to be looking at 3D NAND TLC SSDs there. And again, we're still waiting on the recommended minimums from Sony, but we've largely got everything confirmed from Microsoft and those Seagate drives that are partnered. There's external Seagate game drives and more. We'll go through in section 3. But the NAND there being on that layers is what's important. The controller as well is a big part of why you're not seeing a lot of drives right now, NVMe drives, supporting or at least loudly proclaiming their support of PS5. And that's because the controllers from WD, who generally are all in-house, they have got the Elpis or Ellipsis, I know it has different name, ELPIS, and that controller, their latest revision, is what allows them to have that Samsung 980 Pro, which again may not be good enough. On the flip side, you have the Psion or Phenson, PHYSON. That controller, its latest revision as it stands right now, if we look at Seagate, for example, if we look at the FireCuda 520, which has one of their latest controllers on it, the speed on that is phenomenal. But even then, that's still not enough for PS5 there to reach that top end, which again, if you use that SSD on day one, chances are you're going to be fine speed-wise, because the console won't have the software to get those maximum speeds, but later in its life it will. So that's another reason why you might want to wait. But don't be surprised if you see Seagate the start of next year, maybe even reveal at the same time as PlayStation 5 and Xbox, that they will have a drive that can provide you with that higher speed that you require. Now, a number of you might be screaming at me, why not PCIe Gen 5? Gen 5 would be fine. It's 4,000 per gen. You know, why can't you get that? Why aren't Sony and PlayStation putting that inside their systems? Nice and simple. One, it would be too expensive, and two, it's just not viable right now in terms of NVMe. So the NVMe slots on both these systems right now are pretty much as good as they get in terms of the current gen and moving forward for at least a few years. So again, right now, in terms of internal upgrades, if you're an Xbox buyer, the Seagate 1TB expansion drive, at the moment is very much as good as it gets, and Seagate have done a very good job to get that drive to market early doors and to be promoted alongside it, because 1TB, frankly, for either one of these consoles is not a lot to play with, whereas being up to upgrade it with another 1TB, maybe even larger storage capacities as the controller and the NAND evolve, different story. But right now 1TB is not too shabby, to be honest, and an ejectable little cartridge may seem counterintuitive in a digital age, but still, it's not too shabby. Now, in the case of the PS5, as much as I would love to tell you to upgrade on day one, right now, as far as the time of this publishing is, I wouldn't. Because any drive you buy right this second is not PS5 certified. And you might buy it now, get your PS5 in November, bung it in that spare slot, and it might present a bottleneck down the line. Almost certainly not on day one, but maybe down the line it will. And it may even be that PS5, in its internal firmware, will actually say, not compatible, this drive, or it's not present performance. We're doing a benchmark, it doesn't live up to it. Long term, it'd probably be quite sensible. So I would wait until the start of next year. At least now at the time of publishing, maybe something will change. But as far as right now is concerned, do not buy a PS5 NVMe SSD upgrade unless it's been certified. And of course, I will do testing and upgrades for this channel to let you guys know about some good drives to choose and ones I would recommend overall. So that leads us into our last section, a lot shorter. This is about external storage, because both of these systems have got USB storage, which allow you to connect a drive to your older console generation and download to that drive all of your games for PS4 and Xbox One. It allows you to bung games on that USB drive, bring the drive over, connect it to your PS5 or Xbox respectively, and then play those older generation games. You can't install PS5 or Xbox Series X or S games on that external USB drive. The reason being, one, because of the limitation of the USB there on the external, we'll get into USB in a second, but also simply because you would need that tremendous speed to come from a direct interface there. USB just doesn't provide that. Now, a number of you may have noticed that the PlayStation and Xbox are listed as having USB 3.2. Now, before you go nuts and buy external drives, bear in mind that USB 3.2 is a moderately fluid concept. Those that have been following USB for a number of years will know that the naming convention has gone nuts. It went from USB 3 to USB 3.1 to USB 3.1 Gen 1 to USB 3.2 Gen 1. Now, I've just said 4 or 5 different variants. All of those are the same USB. Bog standard USB 3, the blue one. So, both of these console manufacturers have said they're USB 3.2, but I would highlight that PlayStation is the only one that has stipulated USB 3.2 Gen 2, the 10 gigabits per second connection. Everywhere I've read, and I'm hoping right now I will be proved wrong, everything I've read about the Xbox Series X and S have indicated USB 3.2 with no prefix afterwards about whether it's 10 gigabits per second, 5 gigabits per second, is it Gen 2 or Gen 1. So right now, in terms of an external drive, I can make recommendations for Xbox, but I'm for PlayStation, I'm ever so slightly reluctant to recommend external drives for the Xbox. The reason being that both of these drives I've got here are USB 3 drives, USB 3.2 Gen 1 or USB 3.1 Gen 1, whatever it wants to call itself these days. And both of these will present 5 gigabit connectivity, so it's up to 500 megabytes per second, maybe a touch over. But USB 3.2 Gen 2 drives will give you 10 gigabits or 1,000 meg external. Now, the games themselves can't run any faster than the game itself, but anyone that's ever installed an SSD inside their PS4 or Xbox One will know that you get faster performance, lower latency, shorter loading times, and ultimately a better experience. The same goes if you get an external drive and you utilize a better version of USB. That said, if you do have an external drive and it has a hard drive inside, you're going to be capping out at the maximum speed of that hard drive, typically around 200 megs, give or take, at the top end, particularly 2.5-inch drives. If you go to 3.5-inch drives, big old hard drives that are mechanical platters inside, you might get lucky and get around 260 to 70 megabytes per second from Seagate and WD from external drives. But it still has to be said that those external drives, if they are connected to that external port, if you're going to use an SSD, make sure you know whether the system you're connecting to is USB 3.2 Gen 2 or USB 3.2 ? Because 5 gigabits per second and 10 gigabits per second, huge difference there in terms of gaming overall. You will have to pay more for a USB 3.2 Gen 2 external drive, but not much more. It's not double, certainly. It's just the interface. The drive media inside, whether it's a 2.5-inch or a 3.5-inch drive, are still going to be the same cost. It's just the cost of the connector. Don't just be fooled that a USB-C port like that necessarily equates to USB 3.2 Gen 2. That's not the case, okay? So external drives, you're sport for choice, really. Again, you've got ones like the Seagate Backup, and there are game drives out there that are branded Xbox, PlayStation in the past. They're not strictly necessary, to be perfectly honest. You can get a standard external drive, nice and easy. In terms of with WD, again, I've never gone wrong with a Passport series. It's a bit no frills, but it's fine. If you're going to get one with an SSD inside, I recommend from Seagate looking at some of those Fire CUDA options. Some of those Fire CUDA external drives are fantastic, particularly because you really get the best quality SSDs from Seagate in those external systems. And again, there's the gaming dock that we talked about a while ago for Thunderbolt, but you don't have to go down that road. But again, look at some of the Fire CUDA external options. Failing that, they do have a good, very impressive range of SSDs for external use. And again, with WD, they don't have as many external SSDs in their ranges. Of course, there's Samsung too. But with the external drives, just, if I was you, hold fire until you find out, if you're an Xbox user, if it's 3.2 Gen 1 or Gen 2. Because if you do get faster media inside, that may present a bottleneck down the line. And again, if you're a PlayStation 5 buyer, hold for now on getting an extra internal drive for your system, because it might pay dividends later on to know if you wait just a few months afterwards to get hold of a drive, and you're not going to fill up a terabyte by then. That's madness. So just hold fire until you see some certified drives for PS5. Now, that's pretty much it that we know about storage right now. I might do a video follow-up to this before the release of these consoles with everything that's been confirmed, so do stay tuned for that. There might be a link in the description, but otherwise, do subscribe to this channel to learn more about storage. It's kind of our bread and butter, be it NAS, DAS, Thunderbolt or more. Other than that, click like if you enjoyed the video, click subscribe to learn more, and I'll see you next time.